Angular. About Angular. Recently, I found myself on Reddit. I was like, oh, I want to get some opinions from the community and ask one simple question. What's your least favorite API of Angular? And you know what answer I did get? Number one least favorite API, control value accessor. Yeah, I see some nodding heads. And yeah, this led me to think, yeah, somehow our forms is probably the APIs you use the most, and at the same time, one of the APIs you hate the most. And this is why my talk today, I called it, Adapt It. Forget that you hate writing forms. And for this, I'm introducing to you the new experimental signal forms. So, like I was introduced, I'm Matthieu Riegler. I live in France. I'm a software engineer, also half German. I'm the kind of dude that codes in the train. You often see pictures of me writing something in the train. I'm part of the team as a contractor at Google. And you can find me on different social networks, mostly under my very French nickname, Jean-Mèche. So, Angular and signals. We know that the developers love our reactivity system. It brings simplicity and a breath of fresh air to the way we manage our states. No mark for check, no more change, expression change errors, things like this. And whether your app uses signals or not, whether it runs on the server or on the client, it just works. And even better with this, we have a beautiful composability with them. You can use the computer, the link signals, the experimental resource just to build your state for your application. And to add to that, signals and forms are some kind of a match in heaven. In fact, the use case for building signals was central in the design of, building forms was central in the design and validation of the Angular Signals API. Because the forms were essentially an exercise in complex state management. And early on, the reactivity exploration, we recognized that forms would be the ultimate use cases for signals. So with signal forms, we wanted to start by addressing one of the main questions we often see when developers talk about forms in Angular. Like, should I use template-driven forms? Should I use the reactive forms? And we would want to have a single solution for everything. So one is better than two. Second, we want to take the best part of the template-driven forms, because we know that some of you love the template-driven forms because they are simple. They are they bring the declarative part of the APIs that you love. But at the same time, we know that a lot of developers also love the reactive forms because they scale so well, and also because you have a separation between view and logic. And of course, we want to add to that the signals. And this brings us to what we want, something that is the signal forms. So, one of the biggest exercises we had with the signal forms was to set the design goals we wanted for that API. And oh boy, you will see. First, we want to have something that scales smoothly. That you can go from a basic forms with a few fields to a multi-page stepper. So you can have something that will allow you to manage the complexity of your forms while also having something that is very low boilerplate for the most simple forms. Secondly, we want something that synchronizes effortlessly. If you've used the reactive forms, you know that sometimes it is hard to get the thing between the forms and the model, etc. So we wanted to rely on the reactivity for having a smooth synchronization between your form and your model. And of course, like I said, reactivity. And when I say reactivity is, for example, all the elements you get from your forms, the validity, the values, the states, everything should be a signal. But also, everything should be able to should be able to leverage the reactivity system, so you can able to derive, for example, if your state is disabled, if your state depends on some external data that is not part of your form, things like this. So the reactivity you're already enjoying in your application should be built in directly into the forms. Then, also, this is something that is very important to us, is that we don't live in a vacuum. There is an existing ecosystem that we want to reuse. Like, for example, in forms, you might have libraries like Zod, like Valebot, that do schema validation. They want you to be able to leverage them, if you already love them, into the forms, so you don't have to rewrite some of the most critical part of forms, like validation. Then, we want you to be able to compose freely your forms, to break down them into composable, testable, and reusable small parts of your application. And then also, and this is something that's very important to us, that's almost part of our API, is that you should be able to plug them into your existing forms, so you can have, let's say, the newest API, the one you want to use, but also able to rely on something that's already existing, and having just a built-in compatibility between both, so you can slowly migrate from one to the other. But not only that, there's a lot of different things that we wanted to do to set ourselves for the goal. Like, we wanted to be model first, we wanted to have less boilerplate, we wanted to have no more CVA, and I know that you will love this. We want it to be AI friendly. When I say AI friendly, we want that the AI's clients should be able to generate the forms like you ask them to, without having too many issues. We want them to be type safe, very important. We know that you love TypeScript. The TypeScript brings you the type safety, so you spend less time fixing small bugs. We want it to be declarative. We want it to be also with accessibility in mind. All of this is the goals we set ourselves with the Signal forms. And oh boy, I'm telling you, we want it all. Yeah. But just before I dive into more code examples, I need to mention one thing. So the example I will show you today are all working examples of the prototype we are currently building. So you have to know that this is pretty much a work in progress. In Angular, we have two designations for APIs that we are still working on, still developing. We're talking about developer preview and experimental. The developer preview is mostly an API that we consider complete, that the main features address, no major bugs, but we still want to give ourselves a little bit of space to get in some inputs and address some potential changes, and allow us to introduce breaking changes without having to wait for a major version. With the experimental API, this is something, let's say, completely different. We know that that API is not finished. It's not ready. It's pretty much a work in progress, and we know we're going to break things. And it started very early with the Signal forms. The first version we released since then, we've renamed some APIs. We already changed some behavior. So it's really important that you understand that experimental, we really mean it. It will change, it will break. So if you use it, be ready for that. But we want to give you the opportunity to actually play with it, test it, and give us some early feedback and things that you like or don't like about them already. So yeah, let's dive in directly and let's meet the Signal forms. Let's start, like I said, Signal forms will be model first, model-driven. So I'll take an example of having a simple form like a feedback form with a name, an email, and some kind of feedback text. So when you want to define this, you have a component where you have your signals, that's your model, and what you just do is, okay, you create a form from that model, and that's just it. This way, you create a form object. What does that form object actually do? So it gives you a different access to different information, like the form object, we call that a field tree today. It gives you access to the different fields of the form. Like I said, it is type safe. So you can access to the name. It will say that the name, if you access it, it's a string. We call that access a field tree. So that's a logical access to the data. It's not the data itself. If you want to access the data of the form itself, you just call it. It will give you what we call a field state. And on that state, you can read some elements like the value and the validity. Those both are signals, so you get what you want. You want to have the different states of your form, of your data. So now that we've seen a bit of the TypeScript side of the signal forms, we'll see how we use them in templates. You might remember that with reactive forms, you have to import the modules. With template-driven forms, you have to import the modules. With signal forms, we went with something that's way simpler. We have just one single directive. This is today called field directive. You import it in your component like every other directive that you already did. And you add it on a form this way. You have inputs, regular HTML inputs. You added a field. And from this field, you add the form object and the key you want to access. So here, like I said, it's not a value. That's a path on your form. Now that you have a basic example of the forms, how do you manage the validations? So we go back to our feedback example. We have the model with all the fields. We define our forms. And the first thing that we'll add to the forms where we added the signal is we add to it a callback. The callback is like, you would say, that is invoked during construction of your form. And here we will define the rules we give to our form. Like, imagine you want to access different information. Like I said, you have the field path. This is just a logical access to the form. And here you have the whole form. You can access things like the email, the name. But remember, like I said, this is a logical access. This is not the value itself. You cannot call the value directly and say, OK, I want to do some checks. What you will do, we'll add some rules to our forms. So imagine you want one of the fields to be required. You say, OK, I want my email field, so the path and access the email, I just want it to be required. That's just it. One of the issues that really early bothered me with the forms that were implemented until now is the error messages. The error messages had to be somewhere else, and the logic was very separate between the form and just the message. Here, what you just want to do is add the error message directly to the rule you want to add. So here, required, and if you have an error, it will just show equal email, is required. And the same way, you want to add some other validation. You want it to verify that that email is actually valid. The same way, we have an email validator. And also, if you have an email validator, you add a message to it. OK, email is invalid. So we define all the rules directly into forms. That's what we call the declarative part. Today, at least for now, we will provide a set of built-in validators required, the min, the max for numbers, the minimum length, the maximum length. Imagine you have an array, the email, and the patterns validators. Those are the ones that we already provide with the existing forms. Now, imagine you want to build custom validators, because we know that the initial set that we have won't be enough, and also you want to build in to all your rules. You want to have custom validators. So we get back to our form, and we add that little function that is validate. You pass it the email. Once you've done this, you want to add the condition on this. So you add the callback, so you will be able to access the path of the form. And here, you just say, OK, we want to access the value. So this is a callback that will be called every time validation runs on your form. You are checking the value and say, OK, if the value ends with yahoo.com, you want to have an error. And if you don't want an error, you just return undefined like in existing validators. And of course, you want to add that custom error message. Custom error message has a dedicated function where you also pass the message. So, which is great. Like I said, we declare things at a single place, and it's great to write and also great to read. I remember it was not so long ago. I've been working in development for more than 12 years now. And a couple of years back, someone told me something that's really, it changed something in me, that code is more read than written. So we should aim to something that is easy to read, easy to understand. And with sectional forms, we actually achieve that because you can just understand by reading the declaration of your form what's going to happen. Also, what do I have next? Oh yeah, so if I come back to the total example, like I said, you can have built-in validations, the required, the emails, or the custom validation with the validate. Now imagine you want to do something that is really hard to implement today, for example, in reactive forms, is the cross-validation logic. It requires a lot of boilerplate, it's very buggy if you want to go with something simple, and we thought we want to have something that's even simpler with signal forms. So we go back to an example, most common case of cross-field validation. You want to have a sign-up form where you give an email, and when you want to cross-check that the password matches the confirmed password. So we create our form from our model, like I said, model-driven. And you'll use the function validate to say, OK, I want to validate that my confirmed password matches the value of something else. So you access the value of the confirmed password. And also, you want to access other value of the password field. And for this, you'll use the value of. The value of will allow you to access the value on another field of the form. So P, the path of the form, and here you access the password, and with value, you access the confirmed password field. So here, basically, you just check that you can confirm that both passwords are the same, and if they're not, you create a custom error with that error message, and if it's valid, then you just return undefined. Simple way to describe cross-validation into your signal forms. The same way, if you want to have some disabled validation, you want to disable fields depending on some other fields. Like, it's not validation here, but how you cross-checked between fields and act on it. So when I say that signal forms are reactive, is that you declare some dependencies between state. You're able to have some derivation of the state, like if a field is disabled, I want just to declare a rule. And here you create, so you define your disabled validator, you pass it the feedback, you have the value and value of, so you check that the value of ratings is below 4. If it's below 4, check the rating mate, you want to have something that is higher. Simple cross-checking of fields, either for validation or for some other behaviors. Now, another part that's very important to us, the composition. We know that in enterprise app, forms are really heavy. You sometimes want to reuse elements. You want to be able to test it, smaller parts, etc., etc. So composition is really important. The way you will do composition with signal forms, imagine we have something like an address book where you have data that reuses things like the contact model. So we have a single contact model for yourself, but also a list of contact models, which are your own contacts. Simple form with first name, last name, and just an email. And we create an object which is an empty contact. Like I said, model-driven, you create a signal with you, with an empty contact, and an empty list of contacts. We create a form the same way. You call the form function, you pass it the model, and you have the callback field just to set the validations. So here, for example, I want my form to have at least one contact in it, else it's not valid. So you use the min length validator, you pass it the contact path, you say only minimum one, and your error message. Like I said, again, very declarative. Now, if you want to have a subset, a buildable block for your validations, you will use what we use a schema object. And the schema object, you will say, OK, whatever I give you, I want to give you the rule for a contact element. So the contact model, here you see it's the model I'm giving. It's not something that's really, it's not a form object like we have, for example, in reactive forms. Here I just say, OK, for every contact I will give you, you check that at least it has the first name and that the email is actually a valid email. And again, error messages next to the validation. And you can directly apply that rule into your schema, into your form callback by using two different functions. The first one is apply, when you want to apply that schema to a single field, like book.me, which is only myself and the myself object, where it's a single object, and you just pass the schema that we just created. And if you want to apply that to every element of an array, for example, here, my contacts, I just need to use the apply each. And on the schema, on the path that represents the list of contacts, I just say apply each, the contacts, and I pass it the schema. So a single function can be used to validate both single elements and an array of elements. And this is the part of our composition. And basically, if you want to put it in your forms, like I said, you just, oh, I didn't rename that. So like I said, we changed names. Control was the name that we had before for the field directive. Today it's called the field directive, and you just pass the forms, and you have either the single element, or if you want to iterate with a full block on the context, and you pass every single contact of the array to the field directive. And if ever you want to just update the value on whatever action, you have an add contact button. You just act not on the form objects, but directly on your model. You would directly on the model. If it's a signal that comes from outside, you can act on the signal itself. But here you can access it directly via the form objects. You go to the form, you want the context, you can value, and you update it like a regular signal that you update in your applications. Now, another interesting part is, and this is the first time I saw it, I saw the idea, I was like, fuck yeah, that's what I want. And it's the custom form controls, because, okay, single form, simple inputs, that's really easy, always has been, but you want often to build something custom for you to reuse, or because the complexity of the form behind, you want to hide it a bit. Let's take an example where I just want to build a small rating component. So how would I implement it today without any of the signal forms? And for this, I just create my model. I have a rating. I have a disable state. I would just create the component, pass it down with the two-way binding. I pass the rating, and I pass the disable state. If you look at the code that you will write for this, you have so the star rating component. You have a model for the value, so you can update the parent, two-way bindings with model. And you have a computer that was just, okay, give me the stars so I can show the icon. So if it's not, if the value is below, you will show just the outline. If it's above, you will show the full stars. So real simple component. You add an action on it because you want to be able to interact with it. So it updates the model, so it will update the model in the parent. Of course, you add some styling directly to the component, etc. So basically, no forms on our component. We just have a bunch of signals directly into it. And you would use it the same way I just described, your component, your value, and disable. And you know what? How would you just write this with the signal forms? Well, you won't change very much. You pass the rating, you pass the value, and actually, that's just it. You replace the value with the field directive, you're passing the rating, and no control value accessor. You see, it just works. Just pass the field directive that you added to your component. And it will just works. Isn't it mind-blowing? No more custom implementation, just data-driven, and it's... And it might look a little bit like magic, but it's actually not that much. We have an interface that will just tell you, OK, these are all the signals that if you provide them, we will directly support it into the form support. So if you have a value that is model, if you have an input that is disabled, if you have an input that is disabled reasons, which generate a string or reason, I don't remember. You have a read-only state, you have the validity, you have the dirtiness of your form, the pending status, etc., etc. So all these signals, all these inputs, if you provide them, if you build them into your component, they will be supported directly if you pass it a field directive. And of course, also the error banner. Also, yeah, sorry. You can also pass some sort of metadata. Like I said, everything is defined in the form UI control interface. You will be able to check it. So what are the fields that are already built in and supported without any additional implementation. Just to summarize a bit, yeah. Signal forms are pretty much a work in progress. Today, we are heavily working on preparing some docs for the release next, I want to say next month, but already in November, later this month. We want to work on the async validation, which should be implemented on top of resources, which we know you already like. We want to have some great debounceability on your forms, so you are able to react maybe with some delay, so you don't spam some APIs, for example. We want to work, like I said, on the interoperability with the existing forms. We want to have some heavy type checking so you don't mess your data. Performance optimizations, again, so we don't compute as much. We only compute as much as we need. We want to have to give you the possibility of building dynamic forms, etc., etc., etc. So when I say experimental, it's not only because things will change, it's also because there's so much work that it still needs to be done. If you want to try it today, I invite you to check that StackBlitz example. It's built on the latest pre-release, released yesterday, the V21 RC. I can leave it a few seconds if you want the link. So it's on StackBlitz, edits/signal forms. It's a simple example for you to have a look at and play with it. So, yeah. And like I said, this is available today, to test today. You just have to install the V21 RC, and we will release it in V21 as an experimental API, and we will deliver on regular basis some new features, some new fixes, as we are working on it continuously. And I'd like to thank you so much for being such a great community. And you will find my slides a bit later today on my website directly. I hope you enjoy NGDE today and tomorrow. And if ever you have any questions, you want to talk about anything, I'll be around the next 2 days. And happy to chat with everyone of you. Thank you so much.